Before we begin, if you love stories where humanity flips the galactic script, where predators kneel beside us and councils hold their breath, then make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for more HFY stories every week. Your support fuels these tales. Now, let's step into the chamber where everything changed. The chamber was built to silence. Not because it was empty, but because every being inside it was listening. Rows of tiered seats curved around the center like a colossal halo, each platform holding a delegation from a different starfaring species. High above them, banners shimmered in artificial starlight, each symbol marking a civilization that had shaped the galaxy's laws. At the heart of it all, a single figure stood alone on the presentation platform, straight-backed and unflinching beneath the scrutiny of dozens of alien eyes. Captain Elias Ward didn't wear ceremonial robes like the others. He wore Earth's combat dress uniform, creased at the edges from real use, not pageantry. His shoulders were squared the way only a soldier's could be, a subtle message to every watching delegate. This man had bled, not bargained, his way here. His dark hair was clipped short, his jaw set in iron, but what most noticed wasn't the uniform. It was the lack of fear. Opposite him, behind a curved energy barrier, the creature shifted. The light caught the predator's carapace in shades of black and silver, its every muscle visible beneath its plated hide. Standing at full height, it dwarfed the humans by several heads, its double-jointed legs coiled with patient violence. Its name wasn't spoken aloud, but every being in the chamber knew it. Zarkal. A member of a species so feared that entire colonies had been evacuated at the mere whisper of their arrival. Worlds had burned. Fleets had broken. And yet here it stood, bound in containment but not broken. The predator's eyes, molten gold slashed with predatory vertical pupils, swept across the chamber. Delegates averted their gaze. Elias didn't. Council Chair Virex, a tall, crystalline being whose voice always carried like glass being struck, rose from the central dais. Captain Elias Ward of Sol, it intoned, your species has requested custodial authority over the captured Zarkal warrior. Do you deny this? Elias's voice was low, calm, carrying a rough edge earned in battlefields, not debate halls. I don't deny it. Earth stands by its offer. The chamber erupted in overlapping frequencies. Hissing, chittering, rippling through the air like a storm of disdain. A delegation of scaled Zurians clicked their jaws, their translator units layering their words. Primitive species. You cannot control it. A towering Maravin pounded its clawed fist on its platform. Even our war masters fall to their kind. What makes humans believe they'll do better? Elias didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at the creature again, and for the briefest moment, the predator tilted its head toward him. A simple, silent acknowledgement. Not submission. Not respect. Something in between, an awareness. The chair's crystalline hands folded together. The Zarkal have never been contained, only destroyed. They are born to hunt. To kill. They do not coexist. They do not obey. Elias met its faceted gaze without blinking. Then maybe they just never had a reason to. The murmurs intensified. To many in the chamber, the statement was naive. To others, dangerously bold. Only Rhagor moved slightly at the word reason, though no one but Elias seemed to notice. The council projected a three-dimensional rendering above the dais. Planetary maps painted red, battle recordings of Zarkal tearing through fortified defenses, fleets collapsing like sand structures beneath tidal force. Humanity was small in comparison, recent to the stars, dismissed as a developing civilization. It was precisely why no one expected Earth to be the one to volunteer for this experiment. No one except Elias. The council does not indulge human sentimentality, Virex said, voice ringing. This creature cannot be reasoned with. It must be studied, or eliminated. Elias's jaw tightened. He'd fought wars on colonies no one in this chamber had bothered to defend. He'd seen entire cities wiped away while the council debated logistics. To them, predators were problems to dissect. To him, they were enemies to face. And sometimes, facing an enemy meant looking it in the eyes. He stepped forward, crossing the glowing demarcation line where no delegate was meant to stand. The security field hummed in warning. The predator's golden eyes locked onto him instantly, pupils narrowing to slits. An invisible tension stretched between man and beast, pulling the chamber into breathless stillness. Every species present waited for the moment the human flinched. You didn't? He simply said almost softly, you know what I am. Rhagor tilted its head, the subtle scrape of armored plating whispering through the air. A low, resonant sound vibrated from its chest. Not quite a growl, not quite a word, But Elias recognized it for what it was: comprehension. Not of language. Of intent. The chair's tone hardened. "Captain Ward, your recklessness jeopardizes." He cut in, and the interruption drew gasps from several delegates and used to such directness. "No. What jeopardizes the galaxy is pretending the only way to deal with something dangerous is to put a collar on it or put it down. We keep underestimating what we don't understand." A reptilian delegate spat. "And if it tears you apart the moment it's freed?" Elias's mouth curved, not a smile, not entirely. "Then it'll have to earn it." The predator's nostrils flared, scenting something in the air, a challenge or an invitation. For the first time since its capture, its tail shifted in measured rhythm, not rage. No one in the chamber missed it. No one wanted to believe what they were seeing. Virex stood, crystalline body glittering like ice-catching sun. "Very well. If humanity wishes to claim responsibility for this creature, it will be bound to the conditions set forth by this council. Should containment fail, the resulting destruction will be upon your species alone." Elias inclined his head. "We'll take that risk." The containment field lowered by a fraction, just enough to mark the council's decision. A ripple went through the audience. Some called the humans mad. Others whispered of their stubbornness, their penchant for surviving where they shouldn't. The Zarkal leaned forward, the full weight of its presence pressing down on the platform. Elias could feel its breath, a low, hot gust against the air barrier between them. No one else moved. No one dared. The predator's gaze remained fixed on him, not the council, not the galaxy, not its enemies. Just him. Elias didn't look away. He never would. The chair's voice echoed one last time, formal and cold. "Custody granted." The chamber fell into a heavy, electric quiet. It wasn't victory. It was the sound of a storm gathering, the kind that rewrote histories. Elias Ward stepped off the platform with the weight of 100 alien eyes following him, and the predator watched him go with an intelligence too sharp to be animal. For the first time in centuries, the council had no script for what came next. And in that silence, something dangerous began to take shape, an understanding neither man nor beast had words for yet. The transfer shuttle cut through the void like a blade, silent and sleek. Beyond the reinforced viewport, the human research station floated against the backdrop of a bruised nebula, its lattice of metal and glass humming with quiet, contained purpose. Inside the transport, Elias Ward sat strapped to his seat, hands resting loosely on his knees. Across from him, the creature sat bound in triple-layered magnetic restraints, though the security officers around it still gripped their rifles like lifelines. Rhagor was perfectly still, its massive frame coiled like a storm waiting for a place to break. The golden eyes flicked from soldier to soldier, measuring them without any visible emotion. It didn't struggle against the restraints because it didn't need to. It already knew it could if it wanted to. Elias could see it in the creature's every breath, controlled, deliberate, patient. The transport docked with a soft metallic shudder. The doors hissed open, revealing a corridor washed in sterile white light. The soldiers moved first, spreading out in a practiced perimeter. Elias rose last, unhurried. The beast followed, flanked by 4 armored guards whose weapons never wavered from its chest. The base wasn't built for guests. It was a military research installation, its walls bare and functional, every corridor echoing the faint hum of reactor cores buried beneath layers of steel. The predator's arrival turned the sterile halls into something tense, alive, like a vein about to burst under too much pressure. Technicians stopped mid-step as the creature passed. Some backed away. A few stared, wide-eyed, as though expecting to witness someone's last moment. Elias walked ahead of the formation, his boots ringing on the floor. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. He could feel the creature's presence behind him, like a low note vibrating through the air. His gut told him the council hadn't just sent him home with a weapon. They'd send him home with a test. In the containment chamber, Rhagor was secured behind reinforced energy fields that shimmered faintly blue. The space was deliberately Spartan. Minimal furniture, angled lighting, no shadows deep enough to hide anything. The security team withdrew after sealing the doors, leaving only Elias and the beast between the glowing walls. He approached the transparent barrier until he could see the creature's reflection merging with his own. "They think you'll snap," he said quietly. "They're betting on it." Rhagor tilted its head, the movement slow and alien. Its claws flexed once, scraping faintly against the floor. Elias recognized it for what it was, a restrained reaction. It wasn't pacing, wasn't thrashing, wasn't raging against captivity the way the council's records had shown its kind doing. It was watching. Waiting. A tray slid through the containment hatch, nutrient gel packs, protein strips, water sealed in hard containers. Standard for holding intelligent but dangerous species. Archegor's eyes flicked to it, then back to Elias. It didn't move. You won't eat if you think it's a trap, Elias said, more to himself than to the creature. He crouched near the hatch, opened one of the gel packs with his teeth and took a mouthful. It tasted like salted rubber, but that wasn't the point. He met its eyes as he chewed, then set the rest of the pack on the tray and pushed it back toward the barrier. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Archegor leaned forward, sniffed the air, and tore the package open with casual efficiency. It ate without turning away from Elias. Trust wasn't born. It was acknowledged. Hours blurred into quiet rituals. Elias returned each day, sitting outside the barrier, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent. Archegor's responses were minimal: a shift of weight, a flick of the tail, a faint rumble that could have been thought or warning. The soldiers who monitored the feeds didn't understand what was changing. Elias did. The predator wasn't calming down, it was choosing to listen. On the third night, alarms split the air. The base lights flared red, bathing the halls in a pulsing glow. Elias was on his feet before the voice came over the intercom. Unidentified raiders breaching outer hull. Multiple contacts. Sectors 5 and 6 compromised. He ran through the corridors, pulse steady, boots striking like drumbeats. Security personnel scrambled past him, some shouting orders, some already firing down the side halls. The sharp stutter of pulse rifles cut through the air. When he reached containment, smoke was already drifting through the cracked seals. A blast door hung twisted, half melted from a breaching charge. Someone, or something, had known exactly where to hit. Inside, 3 of the guards lay unconscious, breathing but bloodied. The predator was still in its cell, unshaken. It hadn't tried to escape despite the clear opportunity. Elias didn't question why. He just keyed the release manually. The energy field dropped with a resonant hum. Archegor stepped out, straightening to its full, towering height. The air shifted. It wasn't the airlock that changed, it was the gravity of presence, like a storm rolling into the room. Elias looked up at it. "You want out," he said, breath measured. "Then you fight with me." The predator's pupils narrowed to sharp slits. Its nostrils flared as the sounds of gunfire echoed down the hall. Then it nodded once, a clean, decisive motion. No hesitation. They moved together. The raiders didn't stand a chance. Elias was fast, trained, and methodical. Archegor was a living weapon, a blur of claws and bone-splitting strength. Where Elias aimed and fired, the predator struck with surgical brutality. One of the raiders screamed as Archegor slammed him into the bulkhead with enough force to bend steel. Through the chaos, the predator stayed close. Not leashed. Not commanded. Just there, moving with Elias like a second instinct. At one point, Elias stumbled on the edge of a broken panel, and before he could fall, a clawed hand, gentle, impossibly precise, caught him by the collar and hauled him back. Could have crushed him. It didn't. When the final raider fell, silence returned in fragments. Smoke hung low. Sparks flickered from ruptured cables. Archegor stood in the corridor, blood on its claws, not its own. Its golden eyes met Elias's, unblinking. From the end of the hallway, soldiers arrived, weapons raised in confusion at the sight before them. The beast that was supposed to be contained stood beside their captain like an ally. Not a captive. Elias didn't explain. He didn't need to. He just said, "It's with me." Archegor tilted its head, chest rising and falling in deep, controlled breaths. Then it spoke, not clearly, not fluently, but enough to cut through the stunned air like a blade. "Pack." The word wasn't elegant. It was raw. Heavy. A declaration that didn't need grammar to be understood. Elias felt it settle somewhere low in his chest, steady as heartbeat. Outside, the alarms died down. Inside, something else had begun. A line had been crossed, not in blood but in bond. And though neither of them said another word, both understood that the war they just fought together was only the beginning. The council chamber looked different this time. Not in structure. The circular tiers, the glimmering banners, the watchful alien eyes were all the same, but in weight. There was a hum in the air that hadn't been there before. Not the hum of power or protocol. The hum of fear. Fear rarely announced itself in words. It revealed itself in the stiffness of bodies, the edge in voices, the way even apex species leaned slightly back in their seats when the predator entered. Archegor walked beside Elias, unshackled. The shock of that alone could have silenced the entire chamber, but the news preceding their arrival had already done it. A Zarkal war fleet was cutting through the Persian Reach. Not a scout patrol, not a raid. A fleet. The kind that didn't take prisoners. The Predator's claws clicked softly against the polished floor, each step too deliberate to be anything but intentional. His head stayed high, golden eyes fixed ahead, ignoring the council members who recoiled or whispered behind their hands. The fear wasn't new to him. What was new was the human walking at his side, matching his pace without a trace of hesitation. Elias kept his hands clasped behind his back, posture that of a soldier reporting to command, not a man entering a lion's den. His uniform bore still drying stains from the recent raid, his jaw shadowed with fatigue. None of that mattered now. His presence wasn't for comfort. It was for challenge. Council Chair Virex's crystalline frame caught the light as it rose. Captain Ward. Predator RHA Gore. You stand before the Galactic Council at a time of grave crisis. The Zarkal fleet will arrive within 40 standard hours. They demand the immediate return of their captured warrior. Its sharp voice hung like a blade over the chamber. They demand RHA Gore. The murmur that followed was almost a wave. Some delegates muttered about compliance. Others hissed for preemptive strikes. But beneath the noise was something heavier, the unspoken assumption that this was the end of the experiment. Humanity would hand the Predator back. RHA Gore would return to his kind. War might be avoided. Or at least delayed. Elias's voice broke through like a clean cut through thick rope. No. The chamber quieted instantly. No one interrupted a refusal like that. Not when it came from a species barely a century past its first star drive. Virex's crystalline form tilted forward, as if squinting through faceted eyes. Repeat your statement, human. Elias stepped forward, boots steady against the polished floor. Earth will not hand RHA Gore over to the Zarkal. He's not a prisoner. Not anymore. A dozen voices rose at once. A representative of the Cherethy spat an indignant snarl. Do you understand what your defiance means? They will tear your systems apart. And when they do, they will come for ours. The Maravan War Master leaned forward, a deep growl vibrating through his scaled chest. Human. This is not courage. This is suicide. Elias's eyes moved from one delegate to the next. If you think giving him back will stop them, you're lying to yourselves. You've all seen the same reports I have. The Zarkal don't negotiate. They consume. If they take him, they won't stop at us. Virex spoke again, voice sharp enough to splinter glass. It is not your place to dictate galactic security policy. And yet, Elias said, his voice low and steady, you're still asking me to hand over the only reason they might hesitate. The eyes in the chamber shifted, not to him but to RHA Gore. The Predator hadn't moved through the entire exchange. He stood like a living shadow, muscles coiled beneath dark carapace, tail motionless. But every delegate could feel it, the quiet pressure radiating from him. Virex's tone softened, calculated. Warrior RHA Gore. The Zarkal fleet calls for you. Your kind waits. If you return, this can end. For the first time, the Predator lifted his head higher, gaze fixed on the vast hollow projection that flickered above the dais. The fleet stretched across the screen, a black swarm against the starfield, rows of jagged warships like teeth bared at the galaxy. A voice filled the chamber, deep and guttural, transmitted across the void. RHA Gore, it growled in Zarkal tongue. Blood of the hunt. Son of the devourer. Return to the pack. Stand where you belong. The sound made several delegates flinch. Elias didn't understand the words, but he didn't need to. The Predator stiffened, something feral flickering in his eyes. For the first time since they'd met, RHA Gore looked less like a warrior and more like what the Council feared he was, a weapon built to destroy. Elias said nothing. He just stood beside him, his presence neither begging nor commanding. It was quiet, solid, unmoving. The chamber waited for the inevitable. RHA Gore would choose his kind. How could he not? The Predator moved forward slowly. The guards tensed, several hands brushing over hidden triggers. RHA Gore ignored them. His gaze stayed fixed on the holographic fleet, on the voice that was calling him home. Then, with a deliberate, echoing motion, he turned, not toward the screen but toward Elias. The silence was absolute. RHA Gore's chest expanded with a deep, controlled breath. The alien tongue fell silent. His gaze held Elias's as he stepped closer until they stood shoulder to shoulder at the center of the council floor. Every being in the chamber understood the choice without a single word being spoken. He had not returned to his kind. He had chosen to stand beside the human. The voice on the hologram roared again, this time in fury. A declaration of war. The screen snapped dark. The first to speak wasn't Virex or a council war master. It was a soft-voiced ambassador from the Zevrii, who whispered what everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say aloud. He chose the human. Elias didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He only looked at the predator at his side and gave a small, solid nod. Rhagor returned it, a motion with no ceremony, no performance, but more final than any treaty. Virex's crystalline surface caught the dim light as it spoke once more, its usual control fraying at the edges. Then the council must prepare for war. Elias didn't look away from the chamber as he answered, then it's time they learn humanity won't run from it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The predator's tail flicked once against the floor, a quiet punctuation to a decision that had just shifted the galaxy's balance. The council chamber, accustomed to centuries of politics and measured declarations, suddenly felt smaller. In that silence, alliances were being recalculated. Fears were taking shape. And somewhere beyond the stars, a fleet of predators howled at the thought of betrayal. Elias exhaled slowly, not in relief but in readiness. Rhagor stood beside him, his presence heavy, unwavering. The council may have expected submission, but what it got was the beginning of a war no one had dared to imagine. The sky above the defense grid burned a deep, unnatural red as the Zarkal fleet descended. Their ships slid through the void like serrated blades, formations closing in around the human frontier colony with the precision of a predator encircling prey. Alarms cut through the command center, a chorus of urgency layered over the low, steady rumble of approaching engines. The council's combined forces had taken defensive positions, but there was no mistaking the odds. Humanity had never faced a force this large. Elias Ward stood on the central platform of the war room, helmet tucked under one arm, his other hand gripping the railing. The room pulsed with incoming telemetry, hollow projections of ships forming into a tightening net, red markers multiplying like spreading infection. Around him, commanders of several species argued, their voices overlapping in a storm of fear and calculation. They'll break the perimeter in less than an hour. Our outer batteries will fail before that. We should retreat to preserve assets. Elias's voice cut through the noise. We don't retreat. The room quieted with the sudden weight of his certainty. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. His tone carried the steady rhythm of someone who'd already decided what came next. Across the room, Rhagor stood like a shadow forged from steel, armor plates fitted to his body, plasma-burned scars from past battles still etched across his hide. The predator's presence filled the command center in a way no title could. He didn't need rank to command attention. He was the kind of force people felt. The council had reluctantly agreed to deploy joint forces under human coordination. Not out of trust, but because Rhagor had chosen to stand with them. And the Zarkal fleet feared him. Elias turned to the tactical display. We hold the line here, he said. They're expecting chaos but they'll get resistance. Rhagor and I will take the eastern flank. I want every heavy battery locked in synchronicity. We don't fight like prey. We fight like something worth fearing. The predator let out a low rumble that wasn't speech but carried the weight of agreement. Soldiers along the perimeter lines stiffened when they heard it, fear mixing with something else, an electric spark that hadn't been there before. Minutes later the ground shook. The first wave hit like a hammer. Zarkal war beasts slammed into the outer defenses, their carapaces glistening beneath the bombardment. Plasma cannons roared, lighting the battlefield with white-blue streaks. The air filled with the deep thrum of engines, the shriek of rupturing steel, the pounding rhythm of war. Elias sprinted through the forward trench lines, rifle locked into his shoulder, voice sharp through the comm, push fire to Sector 4. Don't let them breach the gate. He vaulted the last barricade and landed hard in the mud, the scent of burning metal thick in the air. Beside him, Rhagor dropped down with a thunderous impact, scattering debris with the force of his arrival. The predator didn't wait for orders. He moved. A single leap carried him into the heart of the assault, claws rending through the first wave like a living blade. His roar cut through the chaos, so loud it drowned the gunfire for a heartbeat. It wasn't rage. It was declaration. A challenge to his own kind. Zarkal warriors hesitated. Just long enough. Elias took the opening. He drove forward with his squad, pulse rifle spitting bright lines of fire into the oncoming horde. He could feel the predator's presence like a storm at his flank. Wherever Rhagor struck, the line held. Not because they were stronger. Because they refused to break. A Zarkal commander, a massive creature clad in jagged warplate, crashed through the barrier ahead. Its eyes locked on Rhagor with a recognition that ran deeper than words. The two circled in the haze of firelight and smoke, brothers by blood now divided by choice. Elias heard the guttural exchange between them. He didn't understand the language, but the meaning was clear. One called him back. The other refused. Then they collided. The impact rattled the ground. Claws clashed like metal on stone, their roars colliding with the sound of artillery above. Elias didn't hesitate. He pushed forward to cover the flanks, cutting down the Zarkal who surged in behind the commander. He wasn't fighting beside a weapon. He was fighting beside a brother in arms. Archegor moved with brutal grace. Every strike was precise, deliberate, shaped by instinct honed over a lifetime of war. The commander was larger, heavier, but Archegor's speed carved through its defenses. Their battle was a storm in the center of the field, and every soldier watching felt it. This wasn't just a fight. It was a betrayal written in blood. An explosion rocked the trench to Elias's left, throwing him into the mud. His visor cracked, warning systems flaring. He tasted iron as he dragged himself upright. Through the smoke, he saw the commander wrench Archegor off his feet and slam him into the ground, claws digging deep into his chest. The beast bared its teeth, snarling something low and cruel in their shared tongue. Elias didn't think. He ran. Plasma fire burned through the fog as he threw himself between them, unloading his rifle point blank into the commander's side. The creature roared and swung at him, claws flashing like blades. He ducked, rolled, but one strike caught him across the ribs and pain flared like fire beneath his armor. He stumbled, gasping, blood wet against his side. Archegor surged upward with a roar so fierce the air itself seemed to tremble. He slammed into the commander, claws punching through armor, dragging the beast backward in a spray of crimson. The commander thrashed, but Archegor didn't stop. He pinned his enemy to the scorched earth and drove a final, crushing blow through its chest. The roar that followed wasn't victory. It was defiance. Elias collapsed to one knee, coughing through clenched teeth. Archegor turned toward him, blood streaking his armor, gold eyes burning with something beyond ferocity. He reached down, one clawed hand steady as it slid beneath Elias's arm, pulling him upright with impossible care. The predator's gaze shifted briefly toward the horizon, where the rest of the Zarkal fleet hung like a storm waiting to descend. The line hadn't broken. Not yet. Around them, human and council soldiers steadied, rallying not around an order, but around what they had just seen. A predator who bled for a human, and a human who stood between him and his own kind. The next wave would come. Elias could feel it in the distant rumble of the fleet. But for the first time since the Zarkal entered their skies, the defenders didn't look like prey. Elias raised his rifle, blood drying against his side. Archegor lifted his head and let out another roar, this time not to challenge, but to lead. The sound rolled across the battlefield, a single, feral promise. They would hold. Together. The battlefield was a graveyard of fire and iron by the time the storm finally reached its peak. The eastern horizon glowed a furious gold where the Zarkal mothership loomed like an obsidian moon, its surface shifting with the pulse of war engines. Every gun on the ground spat fire, every trench shuddered under bombardment, and the air was thick with smoke, ash, and the metallic tang of blood. The defensive lines had bent but never broken. Not once. Not where Elias Ward and Archegor had stood. But now the Zarkal had stopped testing their defenses. They were coming to end them. Elias stood atop the fractured barricade, visor cracked, armor dented and smeared with grime, his pulse rifle resting against his shoulder like an extension of his own will. He'd been fighting for hours, but his stance held steady. He stared at the black maw of the Zarkal flagship, where the final assault formation gathered, a storm ready to fall. Beside him, Archegor towered in silence, the predator's armor scorched, his chest wrapped in makeshift field bindings from wounds sustained in the last clash. Gold eyes gleamed through the haze, sharp and unflinching. Around them, soldiers from half a dozen species gathered in tired but unwavering formation, their breaths ragged, their limbs trembling, their faces smeared with soot and blood. No one spoke. Words had no power here anymore. Only resolve. Elias glanced up at the command relay blinking faintly in the trench wall. The council's distant voice crackled through. All forces, hold positions. Evacuation is not viable. If the line falls, the colony falls. May whatever gods you believe in be with you. He switched it off. They're bringing the prime, Archegor said, voice low and rough, almost a growl. It wasn't a guess. He could feel it. A predator could always feel when something greater was coming. Elias followed his gaze. A massive silhouette emerged from the descending flagship, wrapped in armor that pulsed like a living thing. Even at a distance, the sheer weight of its presence rippled through the defenders like a physical force. The Zarkal Prime. Warlord. Kinslayer. The one who commanded the fleets. Archegor's claws flexed, faint tremors in his shoulders betraying a tension Elias had never seen in him before. This wasn't just another enemy. This was the one he'd walked away from. The one who'd taught him to kill. You could still leave, Elias said quietly. They'd take you back if you walked to them now. The predator turned his head slightly, the golden glow of his eyes meeting human blue. I already made my choice, Archegor said. And so did you. The Prime landed with a force that cracked the earth beneath its talons. It stood taller than Archegor by a full head, its black carapace etched with the scars of conquered worlds. When it spoke, the sound vibrated through the ground, an ancient, resonant growl that made lesser soldiers flinch. It spoke in the Zarkal tongue, but Elias didn't need translation. Every motion, every gaze said the same thing. Return. Kneel. Obey. Archegor stepped forward. He didn't answer with words. His roar shattered the silence, low at first, then rising until it drowned the cannons, the alarms, even the rumble of the fleet above. It wasn't rage. It was finality. It was his rejection carved into the air like a blade. The Prime lunged. The shockwave of their collision sent a blast of dust and shrapnel outward. Soldiers scattered as the two predators tore into each other with terrifying speed, claws flashing, armor cracking under the weight of each blow. The ground trembled beneath their struggle. It wasn't a duel. It was a reckoning between past and future. Elias didn't stay behind the line. He moved. His squad fell in behind him without being told, pushing forward through the oncoming Zarkal horde. Every inch they gained was paid in blood. Plasma rounds lit the night as he carved a path toward the Prime's shadow. His ribs burned with each breath, but the thought of standing still burned worse. Archegor staggered under a crushing blow, the Prime's claws tearing through his chest plating. The predator snarled but refused to fall, slamming his knee into the Prime's abdomen and driving his own claws into the exposed flesh beneath the armor. Blood, dark and viscous, splattered across the cracked earth. Elias vaulted over a broken artillery piece, dropped to one knee and fired into the Prime's flank. The rounds burned against its plating but didn't pierce. It turned toward him with something between fury and disdain. Archegor seized that heartbeat of distraction. He slammed his claws into the Prime's shoulder, wrenching one of its blades clean off. The Prime roared and struck back, catching Archegor in the side and hurling him into the wreckage of a fallen transport. Metal screamed as he hit. Elias sprinted toward him, sliding down beside the predator. Archegor's breathing was ragged, blood seeping between his teeth. Elias reached to stabilize the wound, but Archegor caught his wrist in a clawed grip. End it, Archegor rasped. Not for me. For them. Elias's hand tightened around his rifle. His gaze locked on the Prime advancing through smoke and flame, its claws dragging through the dirt, sparks flying from its armor. The humans opened fire from the ridge, but it walked through the barrage like a god among mortals. It didn't slow. It didn't care. Archegor pushed himself to his feet with a snarl. Together, he growled. Always, Elias answered. They moved as one. Elias charged low and fast, firing controlled bursts at the exposed joints of the Prime's armor, drawing its attention. It swung at him with speed that could have shattered him in half, but Archegor intercepted, slamming into the Prime's side with a roar that split the night. Claws locked against claws, predator against predator. Elias saw the opening, the Prime's thoracic armor, weakened where Archegor had torn through earlier. He ran toward it like a man with nothing left to lose. The Prime noticed too late. Archegor dragged its head down, locking it in place with a brutal twist. Elias leapt, planting his boots against the Prime's chest, driving his rifle point blank into the wound, and emptied everything left in the chamber. Plasma burned through flesh and armor alike. The Prime roared, a sound that ripped through the night like the end of a world. Archegor held on even as claws tore through his own flesh, even as blood poured down his chest. Elias pulled the trigger one last time. The Prime convulsed, then fell. The impact shook the ground like a falling mountain. For a heartbeat, the battlefield was silent. The Zarkal horde froze, the death of their Prime radiating through their ranks like a breaking spine. Their war cries faltered, then fractured. Archegor collapsed to one knee, his breath shallow but steady. Elias knelt beside him, blood and soot streaking both their faces. Around them, soldiers rose from the trenches, weapons lifted. The Zarkal ships began to pull back. Not in retreat ordered by strategy, but in panic. The predator turned his head toward Elias. "Your kind," he rasped, "was never prey." Elias's throat tightened, not from pain, but from the weight of what had just happened. "No," he said softly. "We hunt together now." Archegor's lips curled in something that might have been a smile. The battlefield echoed with the first victorious roar, human and alien voices mingling in a single defiant sound. It wasn't triumph born of conquest. It was survival, forged in the fire between a man and a monster who refused to be enemies. Above them, the once terrifying fleet fractured into retreating streaks of light. The council's channels filled with stunned silence. No victory speech. No politics. Just disbelief. Elias and Archegor stood at the center of the ruin, shoulder to shoulder, blood mixing with ash. The universe had just witnessed something it had never seen before. The apex predator had chosen humanity. And the galaxy would never forget it.